for those who are not aware, it's the professional body for managers in the hotel and catering industry. We have members all over the world and in very, very different sectors. For these particular sessions, we're concentrating on hotels, and my panel, who I'll introduce in a minute, are very, very closely connected with the hotel business. We've been invited again this year to run a series of sessions focusing on different topics which affect the hotel industry, and we've been doing that yesterday and today, and this is the second of our 3 sessions for this morning. If you're wondering why there are lots of Bloomberg pull-up posters here, it's because Bloomberg have sponsored the entire hotel series, the hotel session series, but the Institute of Hospitality has been the one that's been organising it. I shall be taking my seat in a minute with the panel, and we'll open up with some discussion between the panel, but we do want to make this an interactive session, so there will be plenty of opportunity for you to raise questions and to engage with the panel. Just for a bit of clarification, I just wanted to, the title here says leadership, as if that's it. There is a subtitle, but I've noticed in the way that the guide to WTM has been published that a lot of the kind of ancillary information is missing, and there was a subtitle to that which said that human capital, a look at the changing nature of the hospitality labour force managing the labour market. So we're talking about leadership and management within the context of our sector. And if you look at the way that demography is going to be changing over the next 20 years, I was reading results of a review the other day which was just suggesting that between now and 20 years out, something like 1 billion people will be entering the labour force worldwide. Most of those people are coming from what we would call the emerging economies, the developing nations. At the same time, if you look at all of the growth predictions, irrespective of all the economic uncertainty currently, the World Travel and Tourism Council is still predicting year on year 4% growth in tourism GDP, and something like 50 million new jobs being created between now and the end of the next decade. So there is plenty of room for optimism, but if you're looking at the Western economies, particularly Northwest Europe, America, then what we see is an ageing population. I'm a very good sort of example of that. I'm not getting any younger, none of us are getting any younger, but I'm probably approaching it more rapidly than some others in the audience. And then what does that mean in terms of our labour force? How do we mix and match with young and old? Do we keep people working for longer? How do we employ them? And when you look at the cultural dimension of employment and the whole subject of migration and movement of labour around the world, you can see that it's a big subject. I'd just like to introduce my panel, starting on my immediate right, Liz Hartstone, who's the Managing Director of Profile Management and Specialist Recruitment. Next to her, very pleased to see, you might not understand why he's got a different title, but Guy was very much last minute availability. He's a very, very busy man. Guy is the Chief Executive of Jumeirah, and we're very, very pleased to see him here today. He's jetting through London. Next to him, Peter Ledra, Chairman of Gleneagles, also happens to be the President of the Institute of Hospitality, currently, very experienced hotelier. And right at the end, Sean Wheeler, who's the Human Resources Director for the Dorchester Collection. So we have 4 very experienced panellists who have both local UK knowledge but very, very experienced on the international market. I shall now join them. Perhaps if I could open to nobody in particular on the panel, but that kind of preamble where I was speaking about the changing nature of sort of demographics. Perhaps I will. I'll start with ladies first. In the sense that Liz's company specialises in recruitment on a global basis. So you travel a lot, Liz, and do you see what I've described as some of the major challenges coming up?
Certainly what most industry leaders are talking to me about as their biggest worries. Companies that in the past have perhaps never reached out to recruitment companies are now beginning to talk to us about how they're planning for the next 20 years and finding the future talent and how we can perhaps help them more than we have done in the past. So from our perspective, it's very promising, but it is worrying a lot of big hotel companies right now.
And Guy, you have properties opening all around the world now, beyond the Middle East centre where you were established as a company. Do you find these challenges?
I think so, and it's very different in the various parts of the world. So the challenges that we have in, say, recruitment in China or in Southern Asia are very different to what we have going on in the Gulf. And again, that's very different to what we've got in the hotels that we're opening in Europe. But leadership continues, and the kind of people that you're looking for continue to be a great opportunity inside our industry, because our industry, as everywhere, is looking for people that can encourage young people to come and lead and to join this industry.
And Peter, you've been responsible, or one of the architects of setting up the leadership school in Scotland of late. Do you find that even sort of locally within Scotland that an echo of what Guy and Liz have just said?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that programme is an international programme. It's designed for the globe. It's not just for Scotland, but it happens to be based there with universities from States, Switzerland and Scotland. But yes, the changing, I mean, I suppose in one sense it's always been like that. Our industry, as long as I've known it, certainly has been changing very rapidly, and it continues to do that, and it will continue. Where the leadership piece comes in, of course, leadership is about being able to see that future and try and paint that picture for your people or your business in a way that they want to take that journey, if you like. So our role as in the industry, what we're trying to develop is that talent about how to kind of spot those trends, how to develop those trends, and how to kind of see into the future a bit more.
And Sean, you're sort of, if I can put it at the coalface within the man that most new recruits will see within the Dorchester collection. Is your take slightly different on this?
No, I think we are certainly seeing we've always been a very international hotel. I think the sort of nature of our hotel attracts a lot of people around the world to come and want to work for us, because they see it as a good place to work. We're definitely finding a lot more interest from Eastern Europe, and certainly, we've had a lot of interest, but certainly we're getting a lot of interest from India and China. The challenge we have is visa situations. I think our immigration challenges are quite difficult. That limits the markets we can go in and recruit in. So we're fishing in a small pond sometimes to find that talent. That said, though, I think our biggest challenge is still with leadership is retaining the people we've got. There's a lot to be said about giving those people the skills and to be able to manage and lead a team, and I think that's still a challenge that the program that Peter's talking about and the industry as a whole, we're working very hard at doing.
And picking up on that, do you find that the sort of the cliche difference between me as a baby boomer and the average sort of Generation Y recruit you've now got, is that requiring companies to adopt a very different approach to talent development and leadership potential?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. We've just opened 2 new hotels in the UK, and our average age in both Ascot is 27. Our average age in London is 26, and the Dorchester is 35. So that's out of 1,000 employees. So it's very much changing face. Their need, the sort of Generation Y, Generation X needs are very different. They kind of want it now. They tend to, as a baby boomer, I think we were trained to work hard, keep your head down, and you may get recognised, you may get promoted. But today, I think the Generation X and Y is very much, when am I going to get it? What am I going to get in terms of opportunity, development, progression? I think it's very much the employee market these days, so they have so much choice. So we have to change and adapt our style, and we've done a lot of work at that in the collection. Structured training, a real career path for people, but I think the basics still need to be right. The basics such as engagement, communication, involvement. People want to bring not just their body to work, but their brain and their ideas to work, and I think we have to recognise that to keep young talent you have to adapt your style and recognise they can contribute a lot to the business.
We talk about generations X, Y and the baby boomers a lot in the kind of US and Northwest Europe context, but if you look broader afield, perhaps Guy, do you find that there are the same distinctions, or other sort of cultural differences where those differences are perhaps not as apparent when you're recruiting staff in China, for example?
I mean, there's clearly cultural differences. So the way you would manage a hotel initially, say perhaps in China, it is with slightly less democracy than you might find in some of the organizations around here. But over time, if you want to keep good young people, whether those young people are Cantonese or Chinese, right, good young people will stay if they've got leadership programs, if they've got people who are developing them. And so the challenge is just a challenge at the beginning that's cultural. But as people join international companies, those issues go across all borders. The first approach sometimes is slightly different. What I think you do find a lot more in Asia or in the Gulf is people who want to learn, and a real willingness of, yes, please give me a job, I'll learn and I'll prove myself. Whereas I think sometimes, I know it's difficult to generalize a bit of you're saying now, if children were right, well, I want this and I want this now, and what you can do. And I think over time, those people also in Western Europe will recognize people that work hard, people that actually do have a program that's structured and that can recognize and reward, that will achieve. Same way they could achieve when we were in there.
Yeah, but I think that
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Turning to the youngest member on the panel. Flattery get me everywhere, won't
Only
it?
just, yeah. Actually, I'm not sure Sean's not younger than me yet, but thank you anyway.
You look younger anyway.
He's worn as well. You're generally speaking, I'm probably right in saying that your business isn't particularly focusing on the recruitment of Generation Y individuals. I mean, your people, you're at a kind of more senior level. But do you find that, picking up what Guy was saying about a kind of an equalisation of opportunity and management development is what's sought both by an employer but also by the potential employee who's seeking to change their career? There's a kind of norm across the world in terms of what one's looking for, or are there real differences in approach?
I think each generation there are certain changes that we see coming through. I think because this industry is still 24/7, there's a certain type of person that chooses it, and that won't ever change. You have to be committed, you have to be incredibly passionate, you have to like working hard, long hours. You can't afford to be looking for a 9-to-5 type of job in this environment. So I think that type of person still is what this industry has to keep attracting. The flexible approach. I know Sean and I were talking about this the other day. We both mentor for Oxford Brookes undergraduates, and I think there is at the moment a challenge with some of the younger generation in that they do want it all so fast, and one does need experience somehow along the way to actually know how to manage people better. But it's managing expectations, and I think once they realise, they all come out thinking they can all be a manager. I can remember when I came out of hotel school, we were all advised to be an assistant manager. You have to have manager in your title. And I was a trainee floor housekeeper for 4 seasons, and my hotel school was quite horrified because they thought that was not a good enough title. But I actually moved up far quicker by going in at entry level, I think, and I always encourage graduates to keep that in their minds, because I still think you can get faster, quicker with direct entry than you necessarily can with a graduate programme. But it is a challenge for, I think, leaders in the industry to manage these expectations, because they do want it very, very fast.
Peter, you've been involved with Gleneagles for a few years now. Have you seen that kind of an evolution or a change from the kind of young man or woman that joined you to become a manager, and what their expectations were then and now?
Yeah, I agree with the comments. I mean, I've got 2 sons who said to me as they grew up, "There's no way, Dad, I'm going to work the hours you work." And then I take great delight when I speak to them, call them on a Saturday morning, say, "Where are you, Matthew?" And he says, "Oh, I'm in the office working." Good. Welcome to our world. So it isn't really that different. What I think that generation will change, though, well, there'll be the businesses who get this and the businesses who don't. The businesses who get that these young people have a very different set of skills that what I came into the industry with, and we don't use those skills. It's our loss. They are, I mean, my sons and their peers and the young people we see come into the business, their analytical skills and their ability to problem solve and their ability to look at things in a different way. If you don't harness that, it's a loss to the business. And I would say to the young people coming in that, and I think this is what they want, I think this is what they'll get too, is that, you know, employment's a 50-50 deal. You know, yes, I'll give everything I can, and I'll give my time and my skill, and I'll really work hard, but what's your 50% from the company? What are you going to do for me? And I think that's their expectation, which is a pretty fair expectation if you think about it. So I think that's the change that's coming. I think they will drive that change, and I think it certainly will happen. And they're already getting those people that when I first recognised are now managing hotels, the young managers in hotels now, and they are implementing that. So it will be a changing, they will bring that change through to the industry.
And Sean, sort of picking up on that, because you'll have an age range. I mean, it sounds as if, you know, very low average age in the properties. But do you find that you know, we're talking about the young entrants, but of course there are more senior people embedded in the company who may move and move within the industry, who've already come with a lot of experience. So do you find you're running a kind of almost like a twin track approach to management development? So the 40-year-old something who's well embedded in the industry is having a different, not a different deal, but a kind of a different road to follow than the 25-year-old, whereas in the past they may have been much more sort of aligned?
Yes, I think we are finding that you definitely need to be a lot more individualised in terms of the training. I think the basics need to be there, and I think everybody needs the basics of management and the basics of understanding the product and the quality and the service. But then once you've kind of got through that, I think what we are finding is people want a more tailored approach to their development. They want a personal plan. They want to know exactly what their needs are, what we're going to do to help them. We do have a suite of programs, and we actually have to sit down and sort of tailor it with that individual. And also based on what their skill sets are, like Peter was saying, with some the younger generation in terms of knowledge of technology is fantastic, and we should learn from that and embrace that, absolutely. An interesting thing in terms of how they communicate is very interesting. We've actually gone around now, and I mean, Facebook and Twitter is obviously a key thing, but we've actually now text all our employees to get a message out there to them. So we've actually embraced that, and so if we want to talk to our employees, we send it instead of via an email, we'll send it via text these days, and that seems to work much better. You can get to the individuals and a lot quicker. So we have adapted our approach. I think as a 40-plus person as well, you do expect different things, and you do have to adapt your style. And one of the things we're trying to help our leaders learn is how to be different, and that you can't teach everyone the same. You have to, and their expectations are different. And the old war stories of, well, when I was a boy, you know, and I worked 10 years before I got there. Those days are gone, and we have to accept that now. If we want to keep good people, we have to do something different to keep them, because, as I said, it is very much an employees market these days. There's so much choice out there. So he who gets there, in terms of keeps them, will retain them.
So one thing I'd predict, and I'd be slightly cautious about, I mean, I think obviously concentrate those young people. My prediction is, and we're doing some work on it already, is that this will swing quite sharply in Europe, particularly UK, the other way, because young people will not be coming through. I question whether the industry will be able to compete for some of the people we're currently getting. Even if we've come out of hotel schools, we may not be able to compete with other industries for their services. And I think the industry average age will go back up again, quite dramatic, as people are getting into their 50s and realising, actually, I'm going to have to keep working, and I'm going to have to do something, even if it's not, it's good for us in a way because they're more flexible, is an older person who will be able to work different hours, and but again, we'll have to manage those hours. But I think we need to think about the other end of the spectrum, because there's hope for us yet, Philippe.
I'm not sure. Hope to be working till I'm 80 is something I'm really looking forward to.
But I think one of the things as well coming is I think the age of the generalist has gone. You know, beforehand, we would look at restaurant managers now, people running restaurants. You know, we want them to understand revenue management. We want them to understand, you know, no longer are the days of just what gross operating profit, how much money you're making per seat per hour. The skill set that you want out of people is getting narrower and narrower, and people are becoming specialists in so many different fields, and the way to the top of an organisation, I think, is changing. It's no longer you don't want to be a specialist anymore. If you want to get a revenue management skilled person out of restaurants, you want them to understand restaurants and the difference between a classical restaurant and a high turnover restaurant. It's going to be different.
And do you find that, given your kind of global footprint now, increasing global footprint, that you have to manage that in slightly different ways depending on where the properties are?
Yeah, no, I think we do, but I think a bit as Liz was saying, the major, we're still very much, we want to employ the right people, and then once the right people are coming into us, we see a great obligation on us to get our culture into those people. And I actually still find our biggest challenge, we've employed 8,000 people this year across the whole globe, and we've got really good training programs, and we've got really good PDPs, but actually to be sure that that person in X country behaves the way that we want them to behave in their hearts, boy, I still find that is really, 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 really hard. And so that's why I think getting that selection process, getting that young person, being very clear what their PDPs are, but I still think there's some intangibles that are inside each company has its own culture. How do you get the cultural bits of the general manager that wants to operate one of our hotels in the Maldives? How do I want him to behave at 10 o'clock at night when he's tired? And I want the guy to do the same thing in Frankfurt. And how do you train somebody to behave that way across customer? I think is, my learned colleagues here maybe got it right. We're still struggling very hard to get that right.
It comes back to Peter on the leadership school that's being established within the University of Strathclyde. Are those the kind of sort of topics you're beginning to look at as you create the curriculum there?
It's one of them. The topic, how the leadership school started, was a conference I went to when a well-known hotel financier who trained in hotel school and then went on and did the hotel financing side, stood in a conference and basically said he didn't know a general manager who understood what he was looking for. Now, he was being inflammatory, and that's fine. But what he was saying was that we are still training general managers to make sure that the glass is in the right place and the wine is good and the wine list is fine and the food cost is 30% or whatever. But they haven't rehearsed a clue about the real estate, and they still think they're in the hotel business when they're actually in the real estate business. So that got us all thinking about, well, what are those skills for today that make sure that a general manager running a hotel absolutely understands what the owners want. To me, having asset managers in hotels is an ultimate insult to us, because if an owner says, I don't think the general manager knows what the hell I'm talking about and understands my needs, and you'll have comments on this, therefore I'm going to put an asset manager in, that says to me there's something seriously wrong with me as a general manager in that position. So it's trying to fill that gap between make sure that we, the hoteliers, are also good asset managers, understand the real estate piece, understand strategy, understand brand management. I happen to work for a brand management company, one of the biggest in the world, and when they talk about brands, and then I go and talk about hotel companies talk about brands, we still don't get it. We're not at the front end of that discussion. So it's these kind of skill sets that we're trying to give a good general manager, so when they get to the very senior leadership positions, they are really got those skills where they can talk to owners, to talk to brand marketeers, talk to different people with a real knowledge about those areas.
Is that something you recognise, Guy?
I think very much so. It's the general manager, I think, of this century, he or she, depending where they are, there's just a totally different skill set that you're looking for from them. As Peter's saying, we want them to understand what their building's been cost to build. What's the value they're going to get out of that? What's the value out of that capital? What was the cost of that capital? I mean, things, to be quite honest, I think when I left them first was a general manager, I wouldn't have had a Scooby.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have understood what the question was, never mind what the answer is. You know, but I would expect any one of the general managers that work for me now to know to the dime how much his room cost to build, how much his room refurbishment was, how much the cost of capital was, and what his owner wants out of that. And different owners want different things. So I think the important thing is you want young people to understand the economics and that each circumstance is different.
It's interesting because if you follow the theme that you've sort of laid out there, I mean, you could look at this quite not pessimistically, but in a very different light, because there are a number of hospitality companies, big corporates, who've actually ended up being, both in hotels and in other sectors, being managed by people who are not from the industry at all, because of those skill sets that Peter's touched on. I mean, when what you're painting is a possibly slightly pessimistic picture, that eventually the general manager of the future might be the asset manager with a series of specialists underneath.
No, because all the asset managers in the world, all they want is good operators.
Yeah.
Because they know how to do the balance sheet, and they can sit in front of the computer and they've got the 3 screens and they can move all the numbers across. But they don't have a Scooby how to go and get a customer, or how to look after a customer, or how to bring the customer back. And so the good asset managers will become the owners. And then it will go through this whole cycle again.
Right.
Because asset managers have been brought in because our industry was abysmal at actually trying to understand what the owner wanted.
That's right.
So do you think we're improving on that?
I'm 100% certain we're improving.
Yeah. And do you pick that up, Liz, in your...
Absolutely, absolutely. And any brief we get, owner relations is usually within the sort of 3 top skills that they're looking for.
Right.
And they've got to have a proven track record of developing relationships with owners, and when we reference check, we're probing into that side of their management skills.
So if you look around the world, there aren't many hoteliers running companies. So there's a question mark there, and this is again how the leadership school came about, is that why are there so few people who've come through the industry that get to, the major companies are run by people from Black & Decker and some of the big FMCG companies. There's a lot of movement. In fact, there's a lot spoke both ways, because I was speaking to some major hotel company just recruiting somebody from a major retailer in this company to do their development. And so there's a lot of cross-fertilization that's starting to go on. I think that will continue. And you're right, you may well have people running, already they run hotel companies that never run anything in a hotel. But that doesn't mean they can't run a good business.
No.
But it's having that big picture that we need to develop in our own people in the industry.
We try to a huge example of, say, these big companies. They might have a hotel division, and they might have a film division or another kind of division. You're all fighting for capital, and the thing that you learn really very quickly what to do is you want that capital spent in your division. And you have to fight, and you have to go and fight against a television company or a fast-moving good company or a guy that's making widgets. And you've got to, I think, understand what those different words are that the people are looking for. And it is all the same thing. The price, volume, cost. You put those 3 things into an equation, and no matter what it is, if you're selling chairs, watches, motor cars, get those 3 levers correct. And there's lots of things underneath them. And as we're saying, the leaders of tomorrow have to understand that that's what that is. And I think they do. I'm wildly optimistic for our industry. I mean, if you look at the number of people, so our tiny company ourselves, we're employing 24,000 people we will employ over the next 4 years. And now a lot of it's in Asia and a lot of it's in the Gulf. But we still have got, 4 hotels that we're opening in Europe. So I still think with anybody that are sort of a tenth of my age group that's outside there, it's the fastest growing industry in the world. That good leaders will be needed inside this industry, and there's incredible opportunity. And hey, is it hard work? Shit, yes, okay, but most jobs nowadays are quite hard work.
Yeah,
okay?
that's true. Going back to the kind of Generation X and Y, but picking up this theme about having a sort of broader understanding of what's required of them, do you find that hospitality graduates in particular are leaving universities and hotel schools with that understanding, or is it a bit of a rude awakening when they first get to you?
I think that it's got a lot better. I definitely think we're working a lot closer with universities and colleges now. Industry are working a lot closer as a partnership to understand the needs. I think there was a big gap a few years ago in terms of quite old-fashioned thinking. But I think nowadays, certainly with relationship I've got with Oxford Brookes and Lausanne and places like that, there's definitely understanding that we need to work together, that to be a partnership, that actually they are the future of the industry, and we need to give them the skills. What is the skills the industry wants them to have? And they do adapt their programs, and they have changed their tactic. And the example of the mentoring program that Liz has mentioned, the Oxford Brookes, in the final year they spend time with an industry person, and I think that's fantastic because they actually get time in the industry, get to know what we're looking for, potentially possibly get a job opportunity at the end of it as well, which is great. But it really helps you mould them to understand what to expect when you come into the world, into the industry, and not to have unrealistic views. I think they're much more realistic nowadays of where they're coming. They're much more grounded. They understand. I'm a great believer like Liz that you need to get the basics right and come through and do the job first. You can't go straight into a management position. You can do it. You can, once you're in, you can move very quickly if you prove yourself. But I think there's still this element of proving yourself. The kind of it's starting all over again. And so I believe there's a lot more in touch than they were in the last few years.
Peter mentioned earlier that you might see a kind of shift back to employing older people because we might not be able to retain that talent in the future because they'll be poached by other sectors, and particularly that's a challenge for Northwest Europe, where the populations are aging fairly rapidly, and unless your pension pot is so minimal that you've got to continue working until you're 80, most people are going to want to at least, if not retire completely, but certainly take a less active role in day-to-day life. And that's going to create a gap because we've not been producing children anywhere as rapidly as we should have been. I've got 6, by the way, so I've done my bit. I've done my bit. But too much spare time. Too much time on my hands. That was what the problem was. But so we've got this kind of dilemma that the workforce is aging, and almost by definition, it's not going to be working because it's aging, and the input is not going to match that. So do you recognise that as a business in Dorchester?
We actually actively are going out to attract some of the older workers because I think 2 reasons. One is because, and this hasn't changed when I was young, when you're 21, 22, a year is like a lifetime in your career, and you really want to move fast. And so we also are a name recognised that people come along for a year, 18 months, and get the Dorchester on their CV, and then they go off and do something else. And they'll tell you they're here forever, but there is so much opportunity out there. So we need to balance that. So we are actually putting a strategy together to look for the slightly more mature worker who maybe is in a second job, who has possibly retired and what needs to continue working, looking for some part-time work, looking for that opportunity to keep keep going really. And so we're actually going out to target that. Certainly in the 2 hotels where we've got the average age of those young average ages, just to create some stability.
Right.
Because it has a big impact on the guest experience. People like to be recognised. They like to know who they're being looked after by. And if you've got that churn of talent coming through, then Mrs. Smith, who's on us, won't know any of the team when they come in. I think that's really important. We mustn't lose sight that we're selling experiences and relationships, and I think that's a big part of what we must remember.
I think that's probably quite true, and we would all recognise that, particularly at an operational level, where part-time working is much easier in our industry than perhaps some others. And but just bring us back to the subject, which is about leadership and management, particularly. There will be plenty of housekeepers, concierge, front of house staff in a variety of occupational areas who would fit that kind of that image. But do you see that as much in the kind of management strands as well? So do you apply that in all sort of fields of the business?
Yeah, I mean, we've just Cowes Park. We've recruited a guy who was a bank manager who retired and wanted to carry on working. He's now our concierge, head of concierge. So we taught him the ropes. He had all the management skills. He had all the people skills. He just didn't have the product knowledge, and so we've trained him in that area. Absolutely, I think it doesn't matter about your age, it's about your ability.
I'm
That's
pleased
the
to hear you say
vision of my
that.
bank manager, sort of at the concierge desk.
Yeah,
So,
he's
good
doing
for him,
right.
yeah, great.
But
Wealthy
it's-
bankers
it's
know
good-
that product knowledge. Look what they did.
It's
Keep
good
them out
to
of the
hear you
finance
saying
section.
that they want to work, because I think it's not necessarily employing people because you think they need to work because they're getting older. I think a lot of older people want to
Yeah,
continue
absolutely.
working
Yeah.
or have a break and then come back again. And I think the flexible opportunities are much greater in this business than they are in others. And,
Yeah.
and there's so much time. I mean, my parents are nearly 80 and you think they were 60, you know, they never stop. I can never see them because they're always so busy. So I think as our population ages, they're still very, very fit. And compared to 20 years ago, 80 is the new 60, 70 is the new 50.
Thank
kind of
goodness for
thing.
that.
So-
Liz.
yeah,
keep,
I mean,
keep
don't worry,
talking.
don't say we have to employ them. But a lot of these older people want to work.
Yes, they do.
I think the other we've got to be slightly careful because we're talking about full service. I think the industry's going to split into, it already has probably split into what actually we do, which is the full service luxury end where you expect all those things. But let's not forget the probably all the growth, a lot of the growth is in almost no facilities or service. It's a very good bed, shower, TV, and it's clean, and there's probably one person cleaning it, and that's it.
And it's booked
Yeah.
online.
It's booked online. You'll put a credit card in the wall when you get in. It'll give you a key. You'll go up, sleep, have a nice shower, check out, have a coffee, and go. Or you'll be in a service apartment where again corporates are using much more. So there is a lot of change within the industry that's going to be another challenge to leadership. Where in the industry do you want to lead and manage? So and where's the growth?
Yeah.
So I think it's just we're slightly at the service end, but there's another big part of the industry.
I also think a huge thing is that if somebody's gone out and gone to a university and worked for X number of years to get a qualification, we've actually got to start treating them as though they have got a qualification and pay them properly. Otherwise, I still think we take inside the industry, people go through 4 years, 4.5 years, they come out with a good degree. They've actually learned a lot. And then we give them the most horrible salaries and actually make them start again at the bottom. You know, we've got to get a balance correct. If we want the brightest and the best as an industry, which we do, we've also got to start paying people properly. And if we don't, then we won't get the best people.
The Oxford Brookes lecturers were having that conversation with me just last week, so that will be music to their ears because that was still a big bugbear for them, and that's
But
why
then
we're still losing so many graduates.
And it'll only start when good companies or good owners start paying to get the best and the brightest. And then once you get the best and the brightest, it will start to filter through the industry that you don't join this industry on 15,000 a year. You started at 30,000 a year. And then be a general manager when you're 24. If you've come out, you've got the qualifications and you've done it.
We've
Get on with it.
been panels been discussing a number of topics there within the subject.
Bloody freezing, no?
It is cold, yes.
Keep you on your
Can we organise the people are leaving because they're freezing to death here. But that's I don't know about you, but the panel are pretty chilly.
Same as in a hotel room.
Same as in a hotel room. You can never control the air conditioning. I know, it's a nightmare. Don't get me started.
Number one guest complaint.
Number one guest complaint. There we are. That's it. Let's not go on that the distraction, or we'll be here definitely all day. So far, I hope we've teased your imagination a little bit. Are there any particular questions that have arisen? Anybody want to ask a question of the panel at the moment? Stunned silence. Yes, at the back there. If you could, we'll pass the mic to you. If you could just say who you are, where you're from, and